The bitter cold bit into Olivia Owens' skin as she huddled deeper into the small pile of hay, pulling her tattered shawl tighter around her trembling shoulders. The animal's warm breath created clouds in the frigid air of the stable, offering meager comfort against the harsh winter that had descended upon Walla Walla, Washington Territory, in December of 1872. She'd been on the run for 3 weeks now, each night worse than the last, and this stable belonging to a ranch she didn't know was just another temporary refuge. Olivia pressed her face against the neck of a chestnut mare who seemed unbothered by her presence, grateful for the animal's warmth. The stable was well built, blocking most of the wind that howled outside, but the temperature continued to drop as night deepened. Her stomach growled painfully, reminding her that the last of her meager provisions had been consumed that morning. The creak of the stable door sent a jolt of fear through her body. Olivia shrank back into the shadows, praying whoever had entered wouldn't notice her huddled form. Heavy footsteps approached, accompanied by the yellow glow of a lantern that cut through the darkness. "Who's there?" A deep voice called out, firm but not threatening. Olivia remained frozen, weighing her options. She could make a run for it, but where would she go in this weather? The snow was knee-deep outside, and the temperature had plummeted after sunset. The lantern light fell across her face, and she squinted against the sudden brightness. "Good Lord," the man said, lowering the lantern slightly. "What are you doing out here, miss?" In the lamplight, Olivia could make out his features, tall and broad-shouldered with a strong jaw partially hidden beneath a neatly trimmed beard. His eyes, a piercing blue, regarded her with surprise rather than anger. I'm sorry," Olivia stammered, her voice hoarse from disuse. "I didn't mean to trespass. I'll go." She struggled to her feet, her limbs stiff from cold and hunger. The man frowned, taking in her disheveled appearance, the dirt that smudged her once fine dress, and the unmistakable fear in her eyes. In this weather, that would be a death sentence. He hung the lantern on a hook and stepped closer, though still maintaining a respectful distance. "I'm Daniel Stone. This is my ranch you're currently visiting." Olivia clutched her small bag tighter. "I apologize, Mr. Stone. I was just looking for shelter for the night." "I'll be on my way at first light." Daniel shook his head, his expression softening. "You're half frozen and probably hungry too, I reckon. I've got a perfectly good guest room up at the house. It's warm and there's hot food." Suspicion flared in Olivia's mind. She had learned the hard way that men rarely offered assistance without expecting something in return. "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose." "It's not an imposition," Daniel said firmly. "It's basic human decency. I can't in good conscience leave you out here to freeze." He paused, seeming to read her thoughts. "You'll have privacy and protection under my roof, miss. You have my word as a gentleman." Something in his steady gaze and straightforward manner eased her fear slightly. That, and the fact that she had few options left. "Olivia," she said finally. "Olivia Owens." Daniel nodded, a slight smile softening his weathered features. "Well, Miss Owens, shall we get you someplace warm?" After a moment's hesitation, she nodded, gathering her meager belongings. As they stepped out of the stable into the swirling snow, Daniel surprised her by draping his heavy coat around her shoulders. The unexpected kindness brought tears to her eyes that she quickly blinked away. The main house loomed ahead, a sturdy 2-story structure with light glowing from several windows. As they approached, Olivia could feel the heat radiating from within, a promise of comfort she hadn't experienced in what felt like a lifetime. Inside, the warmth enveloped her immediately, along with the smell of something delicious simmering on the stove. The main room was spacious yet cozy, with a large stone fireplace where flames danced merrily. "Mrs. Holloway." Daniel called out, and a moment later, a plump older woman with gray streaked hair appeared from what Olivia assumed was the kitchen. "Land sakes, who do we have here?" Mrs. Holloway asked, her kind eyes widening at the sight of Olivia. "This is Miss Owens," Daniel explained. "She needs a warm meal and a place to stay. Can you get the guest room ready?" "Of course," Mrs. Holloway said without hesitation. "Poor thing looks half-starved. Come along, dear, let's get you settled." Olivia followed the housekeeper up a wooden staircase, her legs trembling with each step. The guest room was modest but clean, with a real bed covered in quilts and a small fireplace already stocked with wood. "I'll bring up some hot water for washing," Mrs. Holloway said kindly. "And then some stew and bread. You look like you could use both." When the door closed behind the housekeeper, Olivia sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the sudden turn in her fortunes. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to believe she might be safe at least for tonight. Downstairs, Daniel poured himself a cup of coffee, his mind still on the woman he'd found in his stable. There was a story there, one likely filled with hardship. The fear in her eyes had been unmistakable, as was the wary way she'd regarded his offer of help. "Mrs. Holloway bustled back into the kitchen. "That poor child is in a state, Mr. Stone. Whatever has happened to her, it wasn't good." "I figured as much," Daniel replied, staring into his coffee cup. "Did she say anything?" "Not a word beyond thank you. But her hands are raw from the cold, and that dress she's wearing has seen better days. Once was fine quality, though." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "Give her whatever she needs, Mrs. Holloway, and make sure she knows she's welcome to stay until she's back on her feet." The housekeeper smiled approvingly. "Already planned to, sir. There's Christian charity, and then there's plain human decency. Both say we help those in need." Upstairs, Olivia sank into the first hot bath she'd had in weeks, letting the warmth seep into her bones. As she cleaned away the grime of travel and hardship, she wondered about the man who had opened his home to her. Daniel Stone seemed different from other men she'd encountered. There was a steadiness to him, an integrity she sensed rather than saw. Still, experience had taught her to be cautious. Men like Harrison Blackwood had seemed kind at first too, before revealing their true nature. She would accept this temporary haven, but she would remain vigilant. The guest room door had a lock, she'd noted with relief, and she intended to use it. After her bath, Olivia changed into a simple nightgown Mrs. Holloway had provided, marveling at its softness. The stew that followed was rich and hearty, warming her from the inside out. With a full stomach and clean clothes, exhaustion quickly overtook her, and she found herself drifting off to sleep in the comfortable bed, the sound of the crackling fire lulling her into the first peaceful slumber she'd had in weeks. In the morning, the aroma of coffee and bacon roused Olivia from her deep sleep. Sunlight streamed through the bedroom window, reflecting off the fresh snowfall outside. For a moment, she was disoriented, the comfort of the bed foreign after so many nights of rough sleeping. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back: the stable, the rancher's unexpected kindness, the hot meal and bath. She'd slept soundly for the first time in weeks, the locked door providing a sense of security she'd been lacking. A soft knock sounded at the door. "Miss Owens." "Breakfast is ready whenever you are," called Mrs. Holloway's cheerful voice. "Thank you. I'll be down shortly," Olivia replied, her voice still rough from sleep. She dressed quickly in her own clothes, which Mrs. Holloway had somehow managed to clean and press overnight. The dress was still worn and slightly faded, but it was the best she had. After braiding her long auburn hair and splashing cold water on her face from the basin, she felt almost human again. Downstairs, the kitchen was warm and inviting. Mrs. Holloway stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with practiced ease while Daniel sat at the table reading a newspaper. He rose immediately when Olivia entered. "Good morning, Miss Owens. I trust you slept well." His manner was formal but kind. "Better than I have in a long time," Olivia admitted. "Thank you again for your hospitality, Mr. Stone. Please sit down," he gestured to the table. "Mrs. Holloway's breakfast is not to be missed." The housekeeper brought over a plate piled high with pancakes, bacon, and eggs. "Eat up, dear. You need your strength." Olivia hadn't realized how truly hungry she was until the food was before her. She ate with as much decorum as she could muster, though her stomach demanded she devour everything in sight. Daniel sipped his coffee, observing her over the rim. "The storm's passed, but there's nearly 2 feet of snow on the ground," he commented. "Travel will be difficult for a few days at least." Olivia paused, her fork midway to her mouth. "I see. What I mean to say is," Daniel continued carefully, "you're welcome to stay until the road's clear. I wouldn't want anyone venturing out in these conditions." "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose further," Mrs. Holloway tutted as she refilled coffee cups. "Nonsense. This big house could use another presence. Mr. Stone rattles around in here all by himself most days." Daniel cleared his throat. "What Mrs. Holloway is trying to say in her subtle way is that your company would be welcome, not an imposition." Olivia considered her options. The truth was, she had nowhere specific to go. She'd been heading west, away from the trouble that pursued her, with no particular destination in mind. And the idea of facing the bitter cold again so soon was disheartening. "If you're certain, then I accept your offer. Just until the road's clear," she added firmly. Daniel nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good. That's settled then." He folded his newspaper and stood. "I've got chores to attend to. The animals won't feed themselves, storm or no storm." After he'd donned his heavy coat and left for the barn, Mrs. Holloway sat down across from Olivia with a fresh cup of coffee. "He's a good man, Mr. Stone is," the housekeeper said conversationally. "Been running this ranch on his own since his father passed 3 years ago. Does a fine job of it, too." Olivia nodded politely, unsure how to respond. Mrs. Holloway studied her for a moment. "You don't have to tell me what brought you to our stable, Miss Owens, but if you ever want to talk, I'm a good listener and not much of a gossip, despite what they say in town." Olivia managed a small smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Holloway." "Now then," the older woman said, rising with newfound energy, "if you're feeling up to it, I could use some help with the bread. It's baking day and these old hands aren't as quick as they used to be." Grateful for the distraction and the chance to be useful, Olivia eagerly agreed. The morning passed pleasantly as Olivia worked alongside Mrs. Holloway in the kitchen. The older woman chattered away, filling Olivia in on the goings-on in Walla Walla and the surrounding area without pressing for any personal information in return. By the time they'd finished, 6 loaves of bread were cooling on racks, filling the kitchen with their wonderful aroma. "You've got a good hand with dough," Mrs. Holloway observed. "My mother always said you can tell a person's character by how they handle bread." Olivia laughed softly. "My mother used to say something similar. She taught me to bake when I was just a girl." "Is your mother still living, dear?" The question was gentle, not probing. Olivia's smile faded. "No, she and my father passed away 2 years ago. Influenza took them both within days of each other." "I'm sorry to hear that." Mrs. Holloway placed a comforting hand on Olivia's arm. "It's a hard thing to lose your people." Olivia nodded, not trusting herself to speak further on the subject. The back door opened then, bringing with it a blast of cold air and Daniel, his cheeks ruddy from the cold. "Something smells mighty fine in here," he commented, stamping snow from his boots. Miss Owens has been helping with the baking, Mrs. Holloway informed him proudly. Got a natural talent for it. Daniel smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. Is that so? Well, I consider myself fortunate then. There's nothing better than fresh bread on a winter day. Olivia felt an unexpected warmth in her cheeks at his approval. It was the least I could do. I'll have lunch ready in about an hour, Mrs. Holloway announced. Beef stew with that fresh bread should hit the spot after morning chores. Sounds perfect, Daniel replied. I need to head into town this afternoon if the road to Walla Walla is passable. We're running low on a few supplies and I promised to pick up the mail for some of the neighbors. In this weather, Mrs. Holloway frowned. The worst of it's past and we need coffee and flour. I won't be long. He turned to Olivia. Is there anything you need from town, Miss Owens? The question caught her off guard. No, thank you. You've already done more than enough. Daniel nodded. Well, if you think of something before I leave, just let me know. After he'd gone upstairs to clean up before lunch, Mrs. Holloway chuckled softly. In all my years working for the Stone family, I've never seen Daniel offer to pick up personal items for anyone. You've made quite an impression, Miss Owens. I'm sure he's just being polite, Olivia demurred, though the thought sent an odd flutter through her stomach. Perhaps, Mrs. Holloway replied cryptically. Now, let's get this stew dished up. During lunch, Daniel asked Olivia about herself, careful to keep his questions general and unthreatening. She revealed that she was 22 years old, originally from Boston, and had been traveling westward for several weeks. She offered no explanation for her journey or how she'd ended up alone in his stable, and he didn't press for one. Instead, he told her about the ranch, the 100 head of cattle he managed, the horses he bred and trained, and his plans to expand come spring. It was easy conversation, and Olivia found herself relaxing in his presence, drawn to his quiet confidence and the passion with which he spoke about his land. After lunch, Daniel prepared for his trip into town. I should be back before dark, he told Mrs. Holloway as he buttoned his heavy coat. If the weather turns, I'll stay at the hotel rather than risk the ride back. See that you do, the housekeeper admonished. No sense in freezing to death for a sack of coffee beans. As he was about to leave, Olivia approached him hesitantly. Mr. Stone, I was wondering if you might inquire if there's any work available in town. I can't stay here indefinitely, and I'll need to support myself. Daniel studied her thoughtfully. I can ask around, certainly, though I should mention that Mrs. Holloway has been saying for months that she could use some help around here. The ranch keeps growing, and so do her responsibilities. Oh, Olivia glanced at the housekeeper, who was nodding vigorously. It's true, Mrs. Holloway confirmed. These old bones aren't getting any younger, and the good Lord knows this place could use a woman's touch beyond what I can manage. You'd be compensated fairly, of course, Daniel added. Room, board, and wages. Think about it while I'm gone. No need to decide right away. With that, he tipped his hat and headed out to the barn to saddle his horse. Olivia watched him go, considering his unexpected offer. A position here would mean safety, shelter, and income, all things she desperately needed. But it would also mean staying in one place, which carried its own risks. He doesn't make such offers lightly, Mrs. Holloway said, breaking into Olivia's thoughts. Daniel Stone is a man of his word. If he says you'd be treated fairly, you would be. I'll consider it, Olivia promised, though her mind was already racing ahead, weighing the opportunity against the dangers of remaining in one location too long. The afternoon passed quietly. Mrs. Holloway showed Olivia around the house, a spacious, well-built structure with 4 bedrooms upstairs, a study, dining room, parlor, and large kitchen downstairs. It was furnished simply but comfortably, with touches that spoke of a woman's influence from years past. Daniel's mother had good taste, Mrs. Holloway explained as they examined a delicate china cabinet in the dining room. She passed when he was just 16. His father never remarried, just threw himself into the ranch. When the old man died 3 years ago, Daniel took over everything. He seems very capable, Olivia observed. More than capable. He's built this place up into one of the finest spreads in the territory. What he hasn't managed is to find himself a wife. The housekeeper gave Olivia a significant look. Not that there haven't been candidates. Half the eligible young ladies in Walla Walla have set their caps for him. I'm sure Mr. Stone will make his own choice when he's ready, Olivia replied diplomatically, unwilling to pursue that particular line of conversation. Mrs. Holloway chuckled. Indeed he will. Daniel's never been one to be pushed into anything. As promised, Daniel returned before dark, his saddlebags bulging with supplies. His cheeks were red from the cold, but he seemed invigorated rather than exhausted by the journey. "Road's better than I expected," he announced as he shed his outer layers. "The sun did some good work today." "Any news from town?" Mrs. Holloway asked, taking the packages he handed her. "The usual. The Wilsons had their baby, a healthy boy. The stage was delayed again, but should be in tomorrow if the weather holds." He paused, glancing at Olivia. "Oh, and Miss Patterson at the Mercantile mentioned they're looking for help, as their assistant is getting married and moving to Oregon next month." Olivia nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude for his consideration and uncertainty about her path forward. Over dinner, Daniel shared more news from town, creating a vivid picture of the community for Olivia. It sounded like a pleasant place, small enough to be close-knit but large enough to offer opportunities. "Did you have a chance to think about my offer?" he asked as Mrs. Holloway served apple pie for dessert. Olivia set down her fork. "I have. It's very generous and I'm grateful, but you have concerns," he finished for her. "That's understandable, you hardly know me or this place." "It's not that," Olivia said quickly, then paused. "Well, not entirely. The truth is, Mr. Stone, I'm not sure how long I can stay in one place right now." Daniel's expression grew serious. "Are you in some kind of trouble, Miss Owens?" The directness of the question startled her. For a moment, she considered deflecting, but something in his steady gaze encouraged honesty. "Yes," she admitted softly. "Though not of my own making," he nodded, as if her answer confirmed something he'd already suspected. "I won't pry into your affairs. But I will say this: Walla Walla is a fair distance from anywhere, and this ranch even more so. If you're looking to disappear for a while, you could do worse." Mrs. Holloway, who had been quietly observing the exchange, added her own reassurance. "And you'd have friends here, dear. Sometimes that makes all the difference when troubles come calling." Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes, overwhelmed by their kindness. "Thank you, both of you. I think I would like to accept your offer, at least for now." "Good," Daniel said simply, though the smile that briefly crossed his face suggested he was more pleased than his tone revealed. "We can discuss the particulars tomorrow. For now, enjoy your pie." That night, as Olivia prepared for bed, she stood at the window of her room looking out at the moonlight reflecting off the snow. The ranch was peaceful, blanketed in white, the distant mountains dark shadows against the night sky. For the first time in weeks, she felt a tentative hope for the future. The next morning, Olivia awoke to the sounds of activity downstairs. After dressing quickly, she made her way to the kitchen where she found Mrs. Holloway preparing breakfast. "Good morning, dear," the housekeeper greeted her cheerfully. "You're just in time to help with the biscuits if you're willing." "Of course," Olivia replied, reaching for an apron, as they worked side by side, Mrs. Holloway explained the daily rhythm of the ranch: breakfast at 6, dinner at noon, supper at 6 in the evening. Between meals, there was cleaning, laundry, mending, preserving, and all the other endless tasks that kept a household running smoothly. "Daniel's out checking on the herd," Mrs. Holloway informed her. "Some of the cattle wander off in the snow, get themselves stuck in drifts. He and the ranch hands will be at it most of the day." "How many men work here?" Olivia asked, cutting biscuit dough with practiced movements. "Just 3 regular hands, Hank, Miguel, and young Tom. They've got a bunkhouse out past the barn. Good men, all of them. In summer, Daniel hires a few more for the busy season." After breakfast, Mrs. Holloway showed Olivia her duties, which would include helping with meals, cleaning the main house, and assisting with laundry. The work was straightforward, and Olivia was grateful for its simplicity and the routine it would provide. "You'll have Sundays off, of course," Mrs. Holloway explained, "and one afternoon a week to go into town if you wish, weather permitting." "That's more than fair," Olivia said. "Daniel's a fair man. Never known him to treat anyone poorly who works honest." The day passed quickly with Olivia throwing herself into her new tasks. By late afternoon, she had helped clean the parlor, prepare vegetables for dinner, and sort linens for washing the next day. The physical labor was a welcome distraction from her troubled thoughts. Daniel returned just before dinner, accompanied by a blast of cold air and the stomping of boots. He looked tired but satisfied. "Found all the strays," he announced. "No losses from the storm, thank the Lord." "That's good news," Mrs. Holloway replied. "Now wash up before you track half the pasture through my clean kitchen." He grinned at the scolding and caught Olivia's eye. "Has Mrs. Holloway put you to work already?" "She has, and I'm grateful for it," Olivia answered honestly. Something in her response seemed to please him. "Well, don't let her work you too hard on your first day." "Speaking of work," Mrs. Holloway interjected, "it's high time you cleaned up that study of yours, Mr. Stone. Papers everywhere, and I won't be held responsible if something important goes missing." Daniel sighed dramatically. "The woman never stops, Miss Owens. Consider yourself warned." The light-hearted exchange brought a genuine smile to Olivia's face, something that had been rare in recent months. There was an easiness to life at the Stone Ranch that was balm to her wounded spirit. After dinner, Daniel invited Olivia to join him in the parlor. "I thought we might discuss the terms of your employment," he explained, "now that you've had a day to see what's involved." In the parlor, a fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the comfortable furniture. Daniel gestured for Olivia to take a seat in one of the armchairs while he sat across from her. "As I mentioned, room and board will be provided," he began. "In addition, I can offer $8 per month, payable at the beginning of each month. Is that acceptable?" The sum was generous for a position that included lodging and meals. "More than acceptable," Olivia replied. "Good. Mrs. Holloway has Sundays off and you should too. As for your other concerns," he hesitated. "I want to assure you that you're safe here, Miss Owens. I don't know what or who you're running from, but this ranch is my kingdom, so to speak. No one comes or goes without my knowledge." Olivia felt a tightness in her chest at his words. The offer of protection was tempting, but she knew from experience that no place was truly safe when Harrison Blackwood was determined. "I appreciate that, Mr. Stone, truly. But the situation is complicated." Daniel leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. "Miss Owens, Olivia, if I may, I'm not asking you to share your troubles, but I am offering my help should you need it." The use of her first name startled her, as did the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you," she managed to say. "I hope it won't come to that." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with her response. Now, is there anything else you need to make your stay comfortable? Mrs. Holloway mentioned your clothing situation is somewhat limited. Olivia flushed with embarrassment. She had fled with only what she could carry, and most of her belongings had been lost or damaged along the way. "I'll manage," she said quickly. "Once I receive my first wages, I can purchase what I need in town." Daniel waved away her objection. "There's no need to wait. Consider it an advance. Mrs. Holloway can accompany you to the mercantile tomorrow if the weather permits." "That's very kind, but it's practical," he interrupted gently. "Winter in Washington Territory is nothing to take lightly. Proper clothing isn't a luxury, it's a necessity." Put that way, Olivia found it difficult to refuse. "Very well, thank you." Their business concluded, Daniel surprised her by retrieving a chessboard from a cabinet. "Do you play?" he asked, setting it up on a small table between them. "I do, though it's been some time," Olivia admitted. "My father taught me when I was a boy," Daniel explained as he arranged the pieces. "Said it would teach me to think ahead, consider consequences. He was right, though I didn't appreciate the lessons at the time." They played 2 games, Daniel winning the first, Olivia the second. She found him to be a thoughtful opponent, neither condescending when he won nor petulant when he lost. As they played, the conversation flowed easily between them, touching on books they had read, places they had seen, and the changing landscape of the country. By the time they bid each other good night, Olivia realized she had spent several hours in his company without once feeling the fear and wariness that had been her constant companions for months. It was a small thing, perhaps, but significant nonetheless. The next morning brought clear skies and a slight warming trend. After breakfast, Mrs. Holloway announced that the road to town should be passable enough for the buggy. "Best take advantage while we can," she advised Olivia. "Weather out here can turn on a dime." Daniel offered to drive them, explaining that he had business at the bank that couldn't wait. As they set out, Olivia wrapped in borrowed furs against the cold. She found herself studying his profile as he guided the horses along the snow-packed road. There was a steadiness to Daniel Stone that she found increasingly compelling, a quiet confidence that didn't demand attention, yet commanded respect. Walla Walla proved to be a bustling town despite the winter weather. The main street was lined with businesses, a hotel, saloon, bank, mercantile, and various other establishments that served the surrounding ranches and farms. "Not what you expected?" Daniel asked, noticing Olivia's surprised expression. "I thought it would be smaller," she admitted. "More frontier," he chuckled. "The town's been growing steadily. The railroad's coming through soon, they say. That'll change things even more." At the mercantile, Mrs. Holloway took charge, guiding Olivia through the selection of practical items: warm stockings, sturdy boots, flannel petticoats, and 2 serviceable dresses for everyday wear. Daniel had provided a generous sum, but Olivia was careful not to abuse his kindness, selecting only what was necessary. "You'll need something nicer for Sundays," Mrs. Holloway insisted, holding up a blue wool dress with simple but attractive trim. "Is it church you attend?" Olivia asked hesitantly. "When weather permits. But even if not, a lady should have one good dress for special occasions." The housekeeper's tone brooked no argument. While Mrs. Holloway arranged for the purchases to be wrapped, Olivia wandered to another part of the store, examining the books and stationery items on display. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice the bell above the door jingling until a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Well now, what have we here? A new face in our little town." Olivia turned to find herself face to face with a tall, well-dressed man of about 40, his dark hair streaked with gray at the temples. He smiled at her, though the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Albert Thornton," he introduced himself with a slight bow. town banker and humble servant to the good people of Walla Walla. Olivia Owens, she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. Something about the man set her nerves on edge. A pleasure, Miss Owens. Are you visiting our fair town, or do we have the good fortune of counting you as a new resident? Before she could answer, Daniel appeared at her side. Miss Owens has recently taken a position at my ranch, Thornton. The banker's eyebrows rose slightly. Has she indeed? How fortunate for you, Stone. There was something in his tone that caused Daniel's jaw to tighten almost imperceptibly. If you'll excuse us, we have other errands to attend to. He placed a protective hand lightly at Olivia's elbow, guiding her away from the banker and toward Mrs. Holloway, who was waiting by the counter. I see you've met our local money lender, Mrs. Holloway observed once they were outside the store. Is there something wrong with Mr. Thornton? Olivia asked, noticing the way Daniel's expression had darkened. Albert Thornton believes that everything and everyone in this town should be under his control, Daniel explained tersely. He's not used to being denied. He and Mr. Stone have had their differences, Mrs. Holloway added, her tone suggesting this was a significant understatement. Daniel shook his head as if dismissing the subject. It's nothing for you to worry about, Miss Owens. Thornton and I have a history, that's all. The rest of their time in town passed pleasantly enough, with stops at the post office and a brief visit to the sheriff's office, where Daniel introduced Olivia to Sheriff James Miller, a gruff but friendly man with an impressive mustache. Any friend of Stone's is welcome in Walla Walla, the sheriff assured her, tipping his hat. You need anything, you just let me know. As they prepared to leave town, Olivia noticed Daniel scanning the street with unusual alertness. Is something wrong? She asked. Just being cautious, he replied. Thornton has a way of making his presence felt. The ride back to the ranch was quieter, each of them lost in their own thoughts. As the buggy crested a hill, Daniel pulled the horses to a stop, allowing Olivia to take in the view of the Stone Ranch spread out below them, the main house, barn, and outbuildings nestled in a valley, surrounded by snow-covered pastures that stretched to the distant mountains. It's beautiful, Olivia said softly. My grandfather chose this land, Daniel told her, pride evident in his voice. Came out here with nothing but determination and a dream, built it all from scratch. You love it very much. It wasn't a question. This land is in my blood, he confirmed. I can't imagine being anywhere else. As they continued down the hill, Olivia reflected on his words. To have such a strong connection to a place was foreign to her. Since her parents' deaths, she had felt adrift, and her recent troubles had only intensified that sense of rootlessness. The idea of belonging somewhere as completely as Daniel belonged to his ranch was both appealing and frightening. The next few days fell into a comfortable routine. Olivia settled into her duties, finding satisfaction in the structured days and the sense of purpose that came with contributing to the household. Mrs. Holloway proved to be an excellent teacher, patient but thorough, and Daniel was an undemanding employer, expressing appreciation for her efforts without micromanaging. In the evenings, after supper was cleared away, they would often gather in the parlor. Sometimes Daniel would read aloud from a book or newspaper, while Olivia and Mrs. Holloway engaged in mending or knitting. Other times, Daniel and Olivia would play chess or simply talk, sharing stories and observations as the fire crackled in the hearth. It was during one such evening, about a week after Olivia's arrival, that she first noticed a shift in how she regarded Daniel. He was reading from a collection of Tennyson's poems, his deep voice giving weight and meaning to the verses. Looking up from her sewing, Olivia found herself captivated not by the words but by the man speaking them, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes reflected the firelight, the gentle strength in his hands as they held the book. The realization that she was developing feelings for him came as both a surprise and a worry. Attraction was dangerous, especially now, with her past still haunting her. Yet she couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her whenever he smiled at her, or the way her heart quickened when their hands accidentally brushed as they set up the chessboard. Daniel, for his part, gave no obvious indication that he saw her as anything more than an employee and perhaps a friend. He was unfailingly courteous, respectful of her privacy, and careful to maintain appropriate boundaries. If his gaze sometimes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking, or if he found more reasons to be in the house during the day than was strictly necessary, Olivia tried not to read too much into it. Mrs. Holloway, however, was less subtle in her observations. "The way that man watches you when you're not looking," she commented one morning as they kneaded bread dough together, "reminds me of how my James used to watch me before he got up the courage to propose." "Mrs. Holloway," Olivia protested, her cheeks flushing. "Mr. Stone is simply being kind to someone in need. There's nothing more to it than that." The housekeeper made a skeptical noise. "If you say so, dear. But I've known Daniel Stone since he was knee-high to a grasshopper, and I've never seen him look at any woman the way he looks at you." Olivia changed the subject quickly, unwilling to entertain such dangerous thoughts. Daniel Stone deserved better than to be drawn into the mess that was her life, no matter how her heart might wish otherwise. That afternoon, as Olivia hung laundry to dry in the kitchen, the weather outside being too cold for the clothesline, she heard the sound of horses approaching at speed. Moving to the window, she saw Daniel and his ranch hands riding hard toward the house. Another man slumped over his saddle, clearly injured. Without hesitation, she hurried to the door, calling for Mrs. Holloway as she went. By the time they reached the porch, Daniel was dismounting, helping the others lift the injured man from his horse. "What happened?" Mrs. Holloway asked as they carried the man toward the house. "Hank took a fall trying to free some cattle from a ravine," Daniel explained tersely. "Hit his head on the way down. We need to get him warm and see how bad it is." They brought Hank into the parlor, laying him on the sofa. The ranch hand was conscious but dazed, a nasty gash visible on his forehead. "Miss Owens, can you fetch hot water and clean cloths?" Daniel asked, his tone calm despite the urgency of the situation. "Of course." Olivia hurried to comply, grateful for something concrete to do, while Mrs. Holloway prepared a poultice for the wound. Olivia cleaned away the blood as gently as she could, revealing a deep cut that would likely need stitches. "Someone needs to ride for Doc Evans," Daniel said, watching her work. "But the weather's turning again. It'll be dark soon." "I can go," offered Miguel, the oldest of the ranch hands. "I know the way even in the dark." Daniel hesitated, clearly torn between Hank's need for medical attention and the danger of sending someone out in deteriorating conditions. "If you're sure, Miguel. But take the strongest horse and don't take risks. If it gets too bad, turn back." After Miguel departed, Olivia continued to tend to Hank while Daniel and Tom went to see to the horses and the remaining cattle. Mrs. Holloway prepared a broth for the injured man and hot coffee for everyone else. "You've a steady hand," the housekeeper observed, watching Olivia apply a clean bandage. "Ever done nursing before?" "I helped care for my parents when they were ill," Olivia replied softly, "though it did little good in the end." Mrs. Holloway squeezed her shoulder sympathetically. "You're doing fine by Hank here. That's what matters now." As the afternoon stretched into evening with no sign of Miguel returning with the doctor, Olivia maintained her vigil by Hank's side. The ranch hand drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally muttering incoherently. His pulse remained steady, which Olivia took as a positive sign, but the wound looked angry and hot to the touch. Daniel returned periodically to check on the situation, his face growing more concerned as the hours passed. "Storm's getting worse," he reported grimly after one such visit outside. "Miguel and the doc won't make it tonight. We'll have to do what we can ourselves then," Mrs. Holloway declared. "Miss Owens, do you think you could manage to stitch that wound? I've got a needle and silk thread." Olivia swallowed hard. "I've never done it before, but I can try if it's necessary." "It is," Daniel confirmed, examining Hank's injury. "That cut needs closing, or infection will set in for certain." With Mrs. Holloway's guidance and Daniel holding a lamp for better light, Olivia sterilized the needle in the flame and began the delicate work of stitching the wound closed. Her hands trembled at first, but steadied as she focused on the task. Hank groaned occasionally but remained mercifully still, the whiskey they'd given him for the pain doing its job. When she tied off the last stitch and sat back, exhausted, Daniel's hand came to rest briefly on her shoulder. "Well done," he said quietly, and the pride in his voice warmed her more than any fire could have. They took turns watching over Hank through the night. During one of Olivia's shifts in the early morning hours, Daniel joined her, bringing fresh coffee and a blanket which he draped around her shoulders. "You should get some rest," he told her, sitting in the chair across from hers. "You've done more than enough." "I'm fine," she assured him. "How are you holding up?" he smiled tiredly. "I've been through worse. Ranch life isn't always easy, but it's never dull." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and Hank's steady breathing. "Where did you learn to keep such a cool head in a crisis?" Daniel asked eventually, his voice low to avoid disturbing their patient. Olivia considered the question. "Necessity, I suppose. When my parents fell ill, there was no one else to care for them, and later." She hesitated. "Later, I found that panic never improves a difficult situation." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "That's a lesson many never learn." He studied her face in the firelight. "You're a remarkable woman, Olivia Owens." The use of her first name, combined with the admiration in his tone, sent a flush of warmth through her. "I'm really quite ordinary, Mr. Stone." "Daniel," he corrected gently. "After today, I think we can dispense with some formalities, don't you?" She smiled despite her exhaustion. Daniel then. By morning, the storm had passed and Hank's condition had stabilized. His fever was mild, and when he woke, he was coherent and grateful for the care he'd received. "Don't know many ladies who'd stick a needle in a man's head without flinching," he told Olivia, his voice weak but his eyes clear. "You've got grit, Miss Owens." Miguel returned with the doctor shortly before noon. After examining Hank and pronouncing Olivia's needlework as fine as any I've seen, Dr. Evans prescribed rest and a watchful eye for signs of worsening infection. "You were lucky to have such capable hands here," he told Daniel as he prepared to leave. "Head wounds are tricky business." Once the doctor had gone and Hank had been moved to a more comfortable bed in one of the spare rooms, Daniel found Olivia in the kitchen, helping Mrs. Holloway prepare dinner despite her evident exhaustion. "You need to rest," he insisted. "You've been up all night." "There's still work to be done," she protested weakly. "The work will wait." His tone was firm but kind. "Mrs. Holloway and I can manage for one afternoon." Too tired to argue further, Olivia allowed herself to be guided upstairs to her room. As she reached the door, Daniel surprised her by taking her hand gently in his. "Thank you," he said simply. "Not just for Hank, but for everything you've brought to this house." Before she could respond, he lifted her hand and pressed a brief, warm kiss to her knuckles, then released her and turned away. leaving Olivia standing in the doorway with her heart racing and her thoughts in turmoil. That small gesture of affection marked a subtle but significant shift in their relationship. Over the next few days, as life at the ranch returned to normal and Hank recovered steadily, Olivia found Daniel seeking her company more frequently. Their evening conversations grew longer and more personal, and she began to notice the way his eyes followed her movements, the careful attention he paid to her words, the increasing frequency with which their hands would brush in passing. For her part, Olivia found it increasingly difficult to maintain the emotional distance she had promised herself. Daniel Stone was unlike any man she had ever known, strong without being domineering, confident without arrogance, kind without expectation of return. She found herself looking forward to their time together, treasuring his smiles and wondering, despite all her fears and reservations, if perhaps she had found not just a safe haven but a home. A month after her arrival at the Stone Ranch, Daniel announced at breakfast that he would be traveling to the neighboring town of Dayton for a livestock auction. "I'll be gone overnight," he explained. "Should be back by supper time tomorrow if all goes well. Be careful on the road, Mrs. Holloway cautioned. "There's been talk of bandits operating between here and Dayton." Daniel waved away her concern. "Sheriff Miller has deputies patrolling regularly. Besides, I won't be carrying much cash." After he had departed, Olivia threw herself into her tasks with unusual vigor, trying to distract herself from the uneasiness she felt at his absence. It wasn't until late afternoon, as she was polishing the silver in the dining room, that she heard the sound of an approaching carriage. "That can't be Mr. Stone already," Mrs. Holloway remarked, peering out the window. "Oh, it's Sheriff Miller." The sheriff's expression was grave as he removed his hat upon entering the house. "Mrs. Holloway, Miss Owens," he greeted them. "I hope you ladies are well." "What brings you out this way, Sheriff?" Mrs. Holloway asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected it wasn't a social call. "I'm afraid I have some troubling news," he said, his weathered face creasing with concern. "There's been an inquiry from back East Boston, specifically regarding a missing woman. The description matches Miss Owens here." Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. "What sort of inquiry?" she managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. "A man named Harrison Blackwood has been making inquiries all across the country. Claims his fiancée disappeared with family heirlooms. Got the law involved in several states." Mrs. Holloway moved protectively closer to Olivia. "And what business is that of ours, Sheriff?" Miller looked uncomfortable. "Normally, I wouldn't pay much mind to such things. People come west for fresh starts all the time, and I respect that. But Blackwood's offering a substantial reward, and I've had word that he's hired private investigators to follow leads. Thornton at the bank received a telegram just yesterday asking about new arrivals in the area. And he mentioned me," Olivia concluded, her hands trembling slightly. The sheriff nodded. "I'm afraid so, Miss Owens. Now, I'm not here to make accusations or arrests. I'm here because Daniel Stone is a friend, and I figured you folks should know what's coming." "What exactly is coming, Sheriff?" Mrs. Holloway demanded. "Blackwood himself, according to the telegram. He's on his way to Walla Walla, due to arrive on the next stage." The room seemed to spin around Olivia. Her worst fear was materializing. Harrison had found her, and this time there would be nowhere to run. "Miss Owens," the sheriff said gently, "I don't know what your situation is, and I'm not asking. But if there's anything you'd like to tell me that might help me understand what I'm dealing with here, now would be the time." After a moment's hesitation, Olivia nodded. "Harrison Blackwood was a business associate of my late father," she began, her voice steadying as she spoke. After my parents died, he offered assistance with managing my inheritance. I was young, grieving, and out of my depth. I trusted him." She paused, gathering her thoughts. Over time, he became possessive. He proposed marriage, presenting it as a sound business arrangement. When I hesitated, his true nature began to show. He controlled my finances, monitored my movements, isolated me from friends. "Did he harm you physically?" the sheriff asked, his expression darkening. "Not at first, but when I finally refused his proposal outright, he—" Olivia swallowed hard. "He became violent, said if he couldn't have me, no one would. I fled that night with only what I could carry, including my mother's jewelry, the family heirlooms he claims I stole." Mrs. Holloway made a distressed sound, reaching out to take Olivia's hand. The sheriff's face had hardened into a mask of controlled anger. "That puts things in a different light," he said after a moment. "Unfortunately, without evidence, it's your word against his, and men like Blackwood tend to be persuasive, especially when they have money to back their claims." "What can we do?" Mrs. Holloway asked. Sheriff Miller considered the question. "For now, Miss Owens should stay out of sight. I'll delay Blackwood as much as possible. When he arrives, try to get a measure of the man, and we need to get word to Daniel. He should know what's happening." "Daniel won't be back until tomorrow evening," Mrs. Holloway reminded him. "I'll send one of my deputies to intercept him on the Dayton Road," the sheriff promised. "In the meantime, keep a watchful eye. If anyone unfamiliar approaches the ranch, don't open the door." After the sheriff had departed with a promise to return the following day, Mrs. Holloway insisted that Olivia rest while she prepared supper. "You're white as a sheet, dear. This shock on top of worry about Daniel being away is too much." But rest eluded Olivia as she paced her room, her mind racing. She had hoped foolishly, perhaps, that the vast distances of the West would protect her, that Harrison would eventually give up the chase. Now that hope was shattered, and worse, she had brought danger to the doorstep of people who had shown her nothing but kindness. As darkness fell, Olivia made a difficult decision. She couldn't risk bringing Harrison Blackwood's wrath down upon the Stone Ranch. Despite the sheriff's advice, she knew the safest course for everyone would be for her to leave before Harrison arrived. She would miss the next stage, travel on foot if necessary, but she had to put distance between herself and those she had come to care for. With a heavy heart, she packed her few belongings and wrote a brief note explaining her decision. She would wait until Mrs. Holloway was asleep, then slip away under cover of darkness. The hours crawled by as Olivia waited for the household to quiet. When she was certain Mrs. Holloway was asleep, she crept downstairs, leaving her note on the kitchen table. As she reached for her coat hanging by the door, a voice spoke from the shadows of the parlor. "Going somewhere, Miss Owens?" Olivia whirled around to find Albert Thornton sitting in Daniel's armchair, a pistol resting casually on his knee. "Mr. Thornton," she gasped. "How did you get in here?" He smiled, the expression chilling in the dim light. "This was my family's ranch before Old Man Stone won it in a card game. I know every secret way in and out." He stood, keeping the pistol trained on her. "I've been waiting for you to make an appearance. Seems my timing was perfect." "What do you want?" Olivia asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. "Mr. Blackwood has been most generous with his promises regarding your return. Apparently, you're worth quite a sum to him." Thornton gestured with the pistol. "Now be a good girl and come along quietly. There's a carriage waiting." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Olivia declared, her fear giving way to anger. "Sheriff Miller already knows everything." Thornton's smile widened. "Does he? Well, by the time he figures out what's happened, you'll be long gone. Blackwood's waiting at my hunting cabin up in the hills. Private place, perfect for a reunion between engaged couples." "We are not engaged," Olivia spat, "and I would rather die than go back to him." "That can be arranged too," Thornton said coldly, the pistol now pointed directly at her heart. "Though I'd prefer the reward. Your choice, Miss Owens." Seeing no immediate escape, Olivia reluctantly allowed Thornton to guide her outside to the waiting carriage. As they moved away from the house, she scanned the surroundings desperately, looking for any opportunity to flee. But Thornton kept the gun pressed against her side, a constant reminder of the threat. The carriage traveled for what seemed like hours, leaving the main road and following increasingly rough trails into the hills. Eventually, they reached a small log cabin nestled among the pines, a tendril of smoke rising from its chimney. "Home sweet home," Thornton announced mockingly, "at least for tonight." As they approached the cabin, the door swung open, revealing a figure silhouetted against the warm light from within. Even before he stepped into view, Olivia recognized the straight-backed posture and imperious bearing of Harrison Blackwood. "My dear Olivia," he greeted her, his cultured voice at odds with the cruelty in his eyes. "What a long chase you've led me on." Olivia said nothing, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a response. "Bring her inside, Thornton," Harrison instructed. "It's far too cold for reunions on the doorstep." The interior of the cabin was sparse but warm, a fire blazing in the stone hearth. Harrison gestured for Thornton to seat Olivia in a chair near the fire, which he did none too gently. "You've done well," Harrison told the banker, counting out bills from his wallet. "As promised, half now, half when we're safely on our way back east." Thornton pocketed the money with a satisfied expression. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Blackwood." "Will you be requiring anything else this evening?" Harrison glanced at Olivia, who sat rigid with fear and anger. "No, I believe we need some privacy to reacquaint ourselves. You'll return in the morning to transport us to the train station, as agreed." Thornton tipped his hat and departed, the sound of the carriage soon fading into the night. Alone with Harrison, Olivia felt her fear intensify, though she fought to keep it from showing on her face. He moved to stand before her, reaching out to trace a finger along her jawline. She jerked away from his touch, still defiant, he observed with a cold smile. "I've always admired your spirit, Olivia. Breaking it will be all the more satisfying." "You won't break me, Harrison," she said quietly. "And you won't force me to marry you. I'll fight you every step of the way." His smile vanished, replaced by the rage she remembered all too well. "You seem to be laboring under the misapprehension that you have a choice in the matter." He grabbed her wrist, twisting until she gasped in pain. "You belong to me, Olivia. The sooner you accept that reality, the easier things will be for both of us." "I belong to no one," she retorted, wrenching her arm free. "Least of all a coward who preys on grieving women." The backhand came swiftly, knocking her from the chair onto the rough wooden floor. The taste of blood filled her mouth as Harrison stood over her, his face contorted with fury. "You will learn respect," he snarled, "one way or another." Before he could strike again, the cabin door burst open with such force that it splintered on its hinges. Daniel Stone stood in the doorway, his expression a thundercloud of rage, a rifle held steady in his hands. "Touch her again," he said in a voice like ice, "and I'll put a bullet between your eyes." Harrison straightened, quickly composing his features. "This is a private matter between me and my fiancée. I suggest you leave before things get unpleasant." "I'm not his fiancée," Olivia said clearly, rising to her feet despite the pain in her jaw. "I never was." Daniel's eyes never left Harrison's face. "Step away from her. Now." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Harrison slowly raised his hands in a gesture of mock surrender. "There seems to be a misunderstanding. I'm simply retrieving what is mine, both the woman and the valuable jewelry she stole from my family." "The jewelry was my mother's," Olivia countered. "And I am not, nor will I ever be yours." "Sheriff Miller is on his way," Daniel informed them, his rifle still trained steadily on Harrison. "He's quite interested in speaking with you, Mr. Blackwood. Seems there are similar complaints about your behavior in several states." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Harrison's face for the first time. "The local law has no jurisdiction over matters from Boston." "Maybe not," Daniel conceded, "but they do have jurisdiction over kidnapping, assault, and breaking and entering, all of which have occurred on my property or to people under my protection." As if on cue, the sound of approaching horses became audible outside. Harrison's composure slipped further, his eyes darting around the cabin as if seeking escape. "It's over, Blackwood," Daniel said firmly. "You've lost." When Sheriff Miller entered the cabin a minute later, accompanied by 2 deputies, he found Harrison Blackwood standing rigidly by the fire, Daniel's rifle still trained on him, and Olivia with her head held high despite the bruise forming on her cheek. "Miss Owens," the sheriff said gently, "are you all right?" "I am now," she replied, moving to stand beside Daniel. The sheriff nodded, then turned to Harrison. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm placing you under arrest on suspicion of kidnapping, assault, and conspiracy. You'll be coming with us to Walla Walla to answer some questions." As the deputies led Harrison away in handcuffs, his parting glare at Olivia held all the venom she remembered. "This isn't over," he promised darkly. "A man of my standing won't be held by some frontier sheriff." "Maybe not," Sheriff Miller agreed pleasantly. "But by the time the legal proceedings are through, I reckon your standing won't be what it once was, particularly once we send telegrams to the other jurisdictions where similar complaints have been filed." When Harrison and the deputies had gone, the sheriff turned to Daniel and Olivia. "Thornton's been arrested too. Caught him trying to flee town with a suspiciously large amount of cash. He sang like a canary once we confronted him with evidence of his involvement." "How did you find us?" Olivia asked, still trying to process the rapid turn of events. "Mrs. Holloway," Daniel explained, finally lowering his rifle. "She heard someone in the house and went to investigate. Found your note and saw Thornton forcing you into the carriage. She roused the ranch hands and sent Tom to find me while she went for the sheriff." "Smart woman," the sheriff commented. "Now I need to get back to town and deal with our prisoners. Can you two manage to get home all right? I can leave a deputy if needed." Daniel shook his head. "We'll be fine. My horse is outside and it's not too far back to the ranch." After the sheriff had departed, Daniel turned to Olivia, his expression softening as he gently examined the bruise on her face. "I should have been there," he said, regret heavy in his voice. "If I hadn't gone to that damned auction—" "This isn't your fault," Olivia interrupted firmly. "None of it is. Harrison has been pursuing me for months. I should have been honest with you from the beginning about why I was running." "You were protecting yourself," Daniel said. "I understand that." He hesitated, then added more quietly, "I just wish you'd trusted me enough not to try to leave on your own." The hurt in his voice pierced Olivia's heart. "I wasn't leaving to protect myself," she explained softly. "I was leaving to protect you and Mrs. Holloway and everyone at the ranch. Harrison is a dangerous man with money and influence. I couldn't bear the thought of him hurting anyone because of me." Daniel's expression changed, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You were willing to face him alone to keep us safe," she nodded, suddenly unable to meet his gaze. "You've all been so kind to me. You offered me protection when I had nothing. How could I repay that by bringing danger to your door?" Gently, Daniel tilted her chin up until she had no choice but to look at him. "Olivia," he said, his voice low and intense, "don't you understand yet? There's nothing I wouldn't face to keep you safe. Not because you're under my protection or in my employment, but because you've become precious to me." Her heart seemed to stop, then race ahead. "Daniel, I know it's too soon," he continued quickly. "You've been through a terrible ordeal, and the last thing you need is another man making demands on you. But I want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here." Tears filled Olivia's eyes, not from pain or fear this time, but from a swelling emotion she had tried so hard to deny. "It's not too soon," she whispered. "It's the only thing that's made sense since the moment I saw you standing in that stable doorway." For a long moment, they stood there, the confession hanging between them like a fragile, precious thing. Then Daniel closed the distance between them, his hand gentle on her unbruised cheek as he lowered his head to kiss her. The kiss was soft, careful of her injury, but filled with a tenderness that made Olivia's knees weak. When they finally parted, Daniel rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if savoring the moment. "We should get back to the ranch," he said eventually. "Mrs. Holloway will be worried sick." The ride back was cold but not uncomfortable, with Olivia seated securely in front of Daniel on his horse, his arms around her as he held the reins. They spoke little, both processing the events of the night and the new understanding between them. Mrs. Holloway was waiting anxiously on the porch when they arrived, a lantern held high to guide them in. Her relief at seeing them both safe was palpable, though she fussed over Olivia's bruised face and insisted on making hot tea and applying a cold compress. "That horrible man," she muttered as she tended to Olivia's injury. "Sheriff Miller better keep him locked up tight, or he'll have me to answer to." Despite everything, Olivia found herself smiling at the housekeeper's protective indignation. "Thank you, Mrs. Holloway, for raising the alarm and for caring." The older woman's expression softened. "Of course I care, child. You're one of us now." The simple statement, delivered with such certainty, brought fresh tears to Olivia's eyes. One of us, family, home, things she had thought lost forever. Over the next few days, as the legal proceedings against Harrison and Albert Thornton began, Olivia found herself surrounded by support from not just Daniel and Mrs. Holloway, but the entire community. Sheriff Miller kept them informed of developments, how Harrison's arrogance had quickly faded when confronted with telegrams from other jurisdictions confirming similar complaints, how Thornton had implicated Harrison in an attempt to secure a lighter sentence for himself, how witnesses had come forward once they realized the powerful men could no longer intimidate them. "It'll be a while before the full legal process runs its course," the sheriff explained during one visit to the ranch. "But neither of them will be causing trouble anytime soon, Blackwood's being extradited back east to face charges there as well." With the immediate threat removed, Olivia began to truly settle into life at the Stone Ranch. Her relationship with Daniel evolved naturally, their evenings now including walks around the property when weather permitted, their conversations deeper and more personal. The first time he kissed her goodnight at her bedroom door, Mrs. Holloway happened to be passing by and merely smiled approvingly before continuing on her way. Spring arrived, bringing with it new life across the ranch. The cattle were moved to fresh pastures, the vegetable garden was planted, and the apple orchard burst into fragrant bloom. Olivia found herself increasingly involved in all aspects of ranch life, her position shifting naturally from employee to partner. On a particularly beautiful evening in late April, Daniel suggested they ride out to a spot he wanted to show her. They followed a trail up into the hills until they reached a small meadow dotted with wildflowers, a crystal-clear stream running along one edge. "This is lovely," Olivia exclaimed, dismounting to examine the colorful blooms. My grandmother planted these wildflowers, Daniel explained, coming to stand beside her. She missed the flowers from back east, so my grandfather brought her seeds. They've spread over the years. Olivia smiled at the romantic gesture. Your grandfather must have loved her very much. He did. Daniel took her hand, his expression growing serious. It's a legacy I hope to continue. Her heart quickened as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Olivia Owens, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. When you stumbled into my life, or more accurately, my stable, I had no idea how completely you would change everything. You brought warmth and light back into a house that had been merely functional for too long. You showed courage and compassion that humble me daily, and you taught me what it means to truly love someone. He opened the box, revealing a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. I'm not a wealthy man like Blackwood. My riches are in this land, and what we can build on it together. If that's enough, if I'm enough, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Tears blurred Olivia's vision as she looked from the ring to the man holding it, this good, steady man who had offered her safety when she was at her lowest and love when she least expected it. Yes, she whispered, then more firmly. Yes, Daniel Stone. Nothing would make me happier. As he slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime of tomorrows, Olivia marveled at how far she had come from that cold night in the stable. She had sought only temporary shelter then, a brief respite from her troubles. Instead, she had found a home, a family, and a love worth fighting for. Their wedding took place in June, a joyful celebration that brought together the entire community. The ceremony was held in the meadow of wildflowers, now in full glorious bloom. Mrs. Holloway cried happy tears throughout, and Sheriff Miller stood proudly as Daniel's best man. As Olivia and Daniel spoke their vows beneath an arch of roses and wild jasmine, she glanced at the faces of those gathered, the ranch hands who had become like brothers, the townspeople who had welcomed her into their midst, the land itself stretching vast and promising in all directions. From homeless wanderer to beloved bride, her journey had been one of hardship but also of hope. Later, as they danced under the stars to the music of fiddles and guitars, Daniel held her close and whispered, "Happy, Mrs. Stone." Olivia looked up at him, this man who had opened his home and his heart to her. "More than I ever dreamed possible," she replied truthfully. "Though I still can't believe how it all began with me sleeping in your stable like a vagrant." Daniel laughed, the sound warm and rich in the summer evening. "Best thing I ever found in that stable, and that includes the prize stallion my father paid a fortune for." "Is that so?" she teased, her eyes sparkling. "I'm honored to rank above the livestock." "Well above," he assured her, his expression growing tender. "You're everything to me, Olivia." Everything. As the years passed, the Stone Ranch prospered under their joint care. Daniel's innovative farming techniques combined with Olivia's shrewd business sense expanded their operations beyond cattle to include grain and fruit orchards. They built a larger home to accommodate their growing family, first a son, James Daniel, born exactly 1 year after their wedding, then twin daughters, Emily and Alina, who arrived 2 years later. Mrs. Holloway remained with them, transitioning from housekeeper to beloved grandmother figure for the children, teaching them to bake bread just as she had once taught their mother. Sheriff Miller became a frequent dinner guest, especially after his retirement, regaling the children with tales of the old days in Walla Walla. Occasionally, news would reach them of Harrison Blackwood or Albert Thornton. The former had eventually been released from prison, but found his social standing and fortune greatly diminished. The latter had served a shorter sentence, but was forced to leave Walla Walla, his reputation in tatters. Neither man ever returned to trouble Olivia again. On the 10th anniversary of the night Daniel had found Olivia in his stable, they sat together on the porch of their home, watching their children playing in the yard as the sun set behind the distant mountains. You ever think about how differently things might have turned out? Olivia asked, her head resting comfortably on her husband's shoulder. If you hadn't checked the stable that night, or if I had chosen another place to shelter. Daniel considered the question, his arm tightening around her. I believe some things are meant to be, regardless of the path taken to get there, but I'm grateful every day that our paths crossed when they did. Olivia smiled, watching as James helped his younger sisters build a fort from sticks and blankets, his protective nature so like his father's. So am I. For everything the good and the bad, it all led us here. And here is exactly where we belong, Daniel said softly, pressing a kiss to her temple. As twilight deepened into night, and the first stars appeared in the vast western sky, Olivia Stone reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment of perfect contentment. From a frightened woman sleeping among animals to the confident mistress of a thriving ranch, beloved wife and mother, respected member of the community. The stable that had once been her desperate refuge was still standing, now housing fine horses and sweet-smelling hay, a constant reminder of beginnings and the unexpected gifts that can arise from the darkest times. Daniel's offer of a guest room and protection had been the first kindness in a world that had shown her little. But it was the love that followed, steady, patient, and true, that had transformed that simple act of charity into the foundation for a life more beautiful than she could have imagined. A love that had begun in the humblest of circumstances, but had grown to fill every corner of her heart, and the wide, wild land they now called home.